Two friends,
Two pastors,
two theologians,
exploring God and the greatest mysteries of life.
unscripted,
I'm Dr. Wes Arblaster,
and I'm Dr. Ethan Smith.
and we are...
Mysterion. Today on Mysterion, Wes is back.
Yay!
So we're talking about sadness. Welcome back, buddy.
Thanks, man.
It's good to have you back.
It is...
You have been on a trip. You have been on sabbatical.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Did anybody break into your house while you were gone?
No. I think everything's pretty much okay back home.
I did suggest that to the criminal element that listens to Mysterion while you were gone.
Well, we have that big dog Oscar, so that's probably not the best
Oh,
idea.
yeah, he's terrifying. He would slobber on somebody breaking in.
Yep, they would drown in the slobber.
Yeah. So, you and Chrissy went on a trip. Where'd you go? Was it fun? Life-changing?
It was really, really, really good. It was a special trip for me, I think, because this was the first time that I was able to bring my wife back to my hometown where I grew up, and have her meet old friends and old family, and we did a lot of sightseeing, and it was relaxing and all of that. But there was just something really wonderful about one of the most important people in my life today, like central to my life today, my greatest love, connecting with people she had never met before in the past, my own roots that she didn't really know anything about. The stories that I tell her about where I grew up and all that, she had no frame of reference. Now she knows. She saw the street corner where, we slept in a ditch, and she saw like when the hobo attacked my brother and like all those things, it's all right there.
Songs about any of that? Did you write any songs about any of those things?
You know what? No, I didn't have my guitar, but maybe, and I could get in. You mean back in the day or now?
Yeah, like about your childhood growing up.
No, I have not written any songs about it, but I will say this, and it kind of connects with our episode for today, is that in high school, I was in Florence, in Oregon, in the early 90s, and that was the breakout of the grunge era.
Yeah.
So, Seattle was the epicenter of it, but I started picking up guitar right then, like right when that stuff was coming out, and I had just started to learn to play the instrument. I wanted to be in a band, and music was a huge part of my life in high school. And one of the neat experiences that we had, and I guess I wouldn't say neat, it was just a kind of a strange experience I had, is I took my wife down to this river. We used to live on the river there in Old Town. And my friends and I used to sit there, and we used to smoke cigarettes and talk about what we were going to do in life. Cigarettes. We smoke cigarettes and talk about where we're going to be and what we're going to do
We
in
ate
life.
sandwiches.
And about what we were going to be in life. And, I had aspirations to, be a famous musician, and I was really in art. I was going to be an artist. I was looking at maybe going into film, and, the sky was the limit back then. And like, where were we going to be in 20 years? I remember saying this all the time, sitting on that dock. And it's weird because I left and hadn't really come back for, once in 20 years, right? And then I found myself right there with my wife on that same dock, and I'm like, this is who I am now. Like, it was a strange thing. So I remember right in that spot having that conversation. And it was, I think we're going to get into it a little bit today, but it was kind of a humbling experience too, because, I didn't turn out the way I thought I might.
You're not a rock star?
Not a rock star, man. I'm not. I know. It might blow your mind.
I have a CD.
You have
A
an
Bicycle Grindstone CD. That was Wes's rock band in college.
Pretty good, right? Pretty good.
Sure.
And anyway, yeah. Like, there's a sense in which we look back and you see. I'm thankful for where I am in a lot of ways, but didn't measure up. I don't know. I'm trying to a little bit kind of make a segue to the kind of stuff that we're going to talk about, but I don't want to keep talking. So you can ask me questions about why I didn't measure up or whatever you want to do. So
Give me a second.
He's baiting you with that.
I know. I can't.
I know.
So, you said there was a humbling in that. Like, what was the humbling? Just you're not a rock star. You're not making movies. I mean, you aren't making a podcast.
I am making a podcast. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So I think what it was is, you know, when you're in that phase in your life, you're kind of, and me, maybe it's just my personality too, but very like ambitious, and you know, you're kind of taught by your school and your family and your culture, you know, reach for the stars, you know, like you can do anything. And at that period in your life, like you're getting ready to launch off, right? You're really getting ready to graduate, and you're thinking, yeah, man, I could be this and I could be there. Where will I be? Will I live in New York City? Will I live in LA? Will I live in San Francisco? Like, you know, but I'm gonna want to be in the center of what's important. I want to be in the center of, and I want to give something that's important. And that's the way that we're taught, right? And I could look at myself now and say, well, now I live in the middle of a cornfield in Midwest Ohio, which is not the epicenter of the world, which I thought, I know it's weird. I know.
I've lived here all my life. I'm thinking it was.
But there's a sense in which, you know, you ask anybody on the street where the important places are, you know, they're not going to mention Medway, Ohio on that list. And, you know, I thought I was going to be doing things that, you know, people would know my name. No one knows my name. And no, but on a more serious level, like I never thought I would be divorced. I'm divorced.
Right.
Like I never thought that, you know, I mean, we could go through the litany of things of where my mind might go to for things that I never achieved or failed or whatever. And I'm not saying I'm depressed or anything like that, but there's a sense in which the reality doesn't mix, it does not match the imagination.
Right.
That I
So
have.
let's talk about that, because we are talking about sadness today. It's one of the 8 thoughts Evagrius says we should hate as a destructive thought, not something we should feel guilt over. But we'll get back to where that was. But we were talking as we were preparing how we live in some ways in an age and a place of tremendous abundance. Opportunity, experiences, and yet we live in time, I'd say, of record amounts of just sadness and depression, and people are just overburdened everywhere you look with it. And not just, quote, outside the church, inside of ministry. Sadness is everywhere. Depression is everywhere, and everywhere somebody's trying to sell a cure, whether it's medicine, to things online that you can buy a program to work your way through it. It's big business. But so there's this sort of paradox of the world we live in that's full of all these great things, great experiences you can have, but also this just tremendous record amounts of depression and sadness. And one of the things Evagrius talks about is the way he helps us to see is the way he says it's rooted in the sense of being deprived of some good or some pleasure.
Yeah.
But we were talking about how the backdrop of that is some expectation that I should have this, or I ought to have this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
And something about our world makes us really dwell on those things.
Yeah.
It makes things that are really actually kind of out of reach seem like something that we should be getting or having or experiencing.
Yeah. And
we suffer the loss of those things, even if we never had them, in ways that are just truly destructive in our world.
Yeah. Now, I think it would probably be good to go ahead and dive into that one chapter right about that. But to set this up a bit, we need to remember the last few things that we've been talking about. We talked about lust. We talked about greed. Most of these things are a relationship to the body. And as we said, there's that threefold dimension to the spiritual, to the self. There's the body, there's the soul, and there's the spirit. And it works, Evagrius is working his way from the less destructive passions to the more destructive passions as he moves from animated by these desires of the body to these deeper desires. And I think that's where we're moving from lust and gluttony. We're starting now to move towards these passions of the soul, these deeper passions. And here we have this sense of something in my life that has been taken from me, or that I'm deprived. Right.
Yeah.
So,
And I truly wonder if Evagrius lived in our day. Like, so there's that transition from bodily level to the level of the soul, which means these are getting more serious.
Yes.
So Evagrius thinks sadness is a more dangerous thing, not something we should feel guilty over, but a more dangerous thing than gluttony or sexual impurity.
Yeah.
But it's the first one he tackles in terms of the soul, at least after greed anyway. And you almost wonder if he wouldn't see it as even more important now.
Right. Right.
So he says, his opening line is, sadness tends to come up at times because of the deprivation of one's desires. We want something, we don't have it.
Yes.
And so we get sad. And then he paints a picture very much in terms of his own life and the life of those like him who live out in the desert, right? They've left their families behind, any hope of career. They're living in voluntary poverty and isolation. And he says, certain thoughts first drive the soul to the memory of home and parents, those things you left behind, right? The pleasures of a home and a family, those can only be thoughts to them now, memories. And he says, those get stirred up. Now, when these thoughts find the soul, when these thoughts find that, the soul offers no resistance, but rather follows after them and pours itself out in pleasures that are still only mental in nature, then seize her and drench her in sadness, when the result that these ideas she was just indulging no longer remain. So you've got this idea that the mind, the soul, is preoccupied with remembered or hoped for goods or pleasures or things we want, but when you realize you don't have them, and when it begins to dawn on you maybe you can't have them, then the soul is just overtaken with sadness. Yeah. And that's basically the picture he presents.
Yeah, and our mind chases after that. As we said before, the passions obscure the presence of Christ, the life of Christ within us, and it does that often by these thoughts which pull our emotions, pull our very self towards things that are not of Christ. And here it's obvious these are illusory things. These are things that either, what I mean by that is they're things of the imagination. I would want that. I desire to have that. Or things of the past that are frankly gone. They're done.
Right.
And we look back and we say, I lost that, or I failed at that. And our mind begins to chase after not realities that are present to us, but products of our own imagination. And that sadness sets in as a sense of something that belongs to me, or should belong to me, or had belonged to me, or ought to belong to me, has been taken from me. And that begins that sense in which we fixate.
So
right? We feed on that.
Yeah. So the monk in his time is fixated on the memory of family they left behind. That's a little strange to our experience. Like I still have family around, although we do sometimes lose family. And we can fixate on that in ways that can be destructive or in ways that can be healing. But I want to go back to your story growing up. This idea, because I think sometimes what we have in our world is a tend to fixate on the future. And future goods and pleasures we could have, a future identity that we could have. You talked about this. You actually used the word ambition. Like, I think one of the things that seems like in our culture what we do is we train people to have a kind of ambition. You will be X, Y, or Z. You, if only you work hard, you will achieve all of these things. And the idea is kind of a humble life of loving those around you, of seeking the Lord. Well, that's a disappointment.
Right. Ambition is a good thing. I mean, we actually talk about it as if it's something that you ought to have.
Right.
And the ambition and the greater the ambitions, the more we sort of like praise the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a sense in which if a young person like myself, let's say I'm in high school and I say, I really only want to be a chef or a garbage man or whatever, there's almost a sense of like, well, shouldn't you be striving for more? Right? There's a sense in which the person who strives to become president or the astronaut or the person to solve cancer, well, they're the ones that should be praised. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, in some ways, we set people up. We say you should have ambitions, and the more unrealistic that they are, the better. The more virtuous you will, and the more you sort of, go for it. It's almost like, as a parent, I almost feel guilty if I say, you know what, that's not really that realistic. Maybe you should strive for something like a little bit more like, I don't think you can do that. It's almost like that's a parental no-no. You know what I mean? So there is a sense in which we encourage people to have ambitions. We say it's a good thing. The bigger, the better, right? And go out and do it. But what do we actually do? I mean, in my case, it was, I want to be this musician, and I want to, be in the center of, Seattle, the coolest city in the world, and write awesome music and all of that. What happens when we're set up with that kind of stuff?
And for some people, they get there and it's not fulfilling. But, for most, that doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
And, I mean, the irony of you suffer the loss. You go through not being a rock star as though it's a loss.
Right. Exactly.
It was never real, man.
No. I'm not that good.
I've got the CDs. No, but you've never been a rock star.
No.
But you have been set up to suffer that like a deprivation.
Right.
And that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's not just parenting and schooling. It's everywhere. Like, our whole economy is set up on the inflation of ambitions to build a certain identity and career and so forth.
And I would say, in addition to that, when you're young, it tends to be, oftentimes it's related to your profession. We focus on your profession. And when you start to reach more the middle age period of your life, which we're in.
Yeah, you are.
I'm yeah, sure. Is that a lot of it's centered around the condition of your family, the condition of your marriage. My marriage ought to look this way. I ought to be bringing in this kind of income. My kids ought to be behaving this way. And somehow it's not matching that ideal. And because it's not matching that ideal, the deep sadness.
Well, and then I think it redounds on itself, because one of the things I think we do in our culture is we also say you ought to be able to regulate your affect. You ought to be able to regulate your feelings, right? So I think our culture sets us up to desire just these goods, these pleasures, these identities that are just in your head. And when those don't materialize, you're sad. And then the second move is to say, you should be able to regulate your own feelings.
Right.
And so the sadness becomes depression when we say you should be able to. I mean, this is all over. We even do this in the church. I was telling you beforehand, somebody close to me was going through a really hard time, and this person found a thing online that was like 30 days of devotions to beat depression. And because the expectation is, if you do all the right things, there's no hardship, you won't feel bad, right? And 30 days into it, this person called me and said, I did this, I'm still depressed, and these were the words, "What is wrong with me?"
Yeah.
Right? Or like we raise kids, you will be the president. Well, one or two people from a whole generation becomes president, and then like this is like a caricature version, right? But when you don't do it, you don't achieve it.
Yes.
Or it replays, and it's we do it professionally in life. We do it regulating your own feelings. You're supposed to be able to do that. And the thing is, what we tell people is, the only thing standing between you and these inflated desires is you. If only you would do it the right way. And then when we're crushed over that, then we say the only problem with you and your feelings of guilt or what have you is you.
Yeah, and I want to say just a side note about that, this is another reason why spiritual teaching, and I think in theology and these things, are so very important, because that's a perfect example of the way that Christian spirituality becomes toxic and damaging to people.
Yes.
There are ways of reading scripture. There are ways of praying. There's ways of engaging in the Christian life that's positively self-destructive. And not self-destructive, destructive. And I'm sure when those people wrote those devotions, they weren't trying to destroy people,
No.
but that's just the way to drive them deeper into despair,
Yes.
to just heap on guilt on top of the sadness. And this is so very important, why we have to really attend spiritually to these things, seriously consider what's going on in light of Christ and who we are in the light of Christ, so that we do not do that to ourselves and we do not do that to other people, because we can cloak all kinds of really destructive ways of acting, behaving, living, praying in Christian garb, and it's
Yeah, we
still
do.
as damaging as ever.
And I mentioned before on the podcast, like we live in the era that some sociologists have termed the era of cruel optimism, right? There are these things we tell people, if you relate to yourself like this project of self-making,
Yes.
you're an entrepreneurial project. And if you just do everything right, then all of these things will come for you, right?
Yes.
Wealth, celebrity, a particular type of identity, a particular type of spiritual identity, or so forth. Your emotions will be great, and all these things. And then the problem is, those things are, those aren't great goals. Like already that's bad, right? You know,
Right.
union with Christ is really what life is for, regardless of outward situation. But secondly, it's not all up to Wes whether or not Wes becomes a rock star.
No,
Or like,
that's right.
or like for our generation
Right.
and slightly younger, it's not up to them to be able to reproduce the home life that their parents produced, and then we blame them
Right.
for broader
Right.
things, and then we do it in the church, right? We talked about this. One of the reasons pastors sometimes dangle out illusory like goods and pleasures and things, if you come to church, your life will just be great, and we can poison people that way, is also because we tell ourselves a story. If only we do our jobs right,
Right.
then the church will grow. And then no one pays attention to the fact that church attendance across the nation is down. Attendance to things like bowling leagues or labor unions or any kind of collective gathering are down.
Right.
But the only story we'll tell ourselves is the story of the project of me. And if the church I run isn't growing, it's my fault.
So, yeah.
So I have that pressure I put on myself. Therefore, I put a pressure on people. We promise these things.
That's right.
and then
we spin a web. There's an entire web of spun of ambition mixed with false promises and a kind of story of, if you work hard enough and you do hard enough, you should be successful. And when and success, again, the bigger the success, the better. We set people up for failure. And the church is, I mean, as guilty as I would say any other, perhaps more guilty, because we're trying to, again, trying to bring people in and make them excited about Jesus. So why don't we just promise them everything? If they just pray and follow Jesus,
Yes.
you know, you're going to get, you know, every obstacle in your life is going to be removed. And
So that's the obscene side of it,
Right.
every external obstacle. But then the subtle side is, if your life is together internally, you're not going to struggle.
Right.
Oh, maybe you will
Right.
not be able to pay your bills, but internally, you'll be just fine. And if there is sadness and depression in your life, even though you just live in the soup of depression that is our culture, it's your fault.
right.
If you were just more devoted.
Yep. So what we have with Evagrius is Evagrius basically saying that these images, these ideas, the ambitions, and also the regrets and all of these kinds of things, that our mind is prone to chase them. Our culture prompts this. So this is one of the eights that is going to pull us away from Christ. It's going to pull us away from the place of peace, which is Christ, that, again, to reference back other episodes, the apatheia, right? The peace, the stillness,
Dispassion,
the
yeah.
dispassion of Christ. It takes us, it spins a whole web of desire and frustration and sorrow. And so to really get into how do we deal with this?
And if I
Where
just-
are we going to go?
Real quickly, what we don't want to do is what we do is, I think now is so often, is we keep feeding the poison. If somebody is destroyed over these goods or desires that were just in their mind that never materialized, let's just get them excited about other ones.
Yeah.
And we do this whether through commercials or life coaches or in the church, and it's just, here, take a little bit more poison that will help you step forward the next day, get excited for a little while. And that's not what we want to do.
No.
We're looking for that stillness, you said, that is the life of Jesus Christ in us. So we talk, and Evagrius doesn't have a lot to say beyond that, but we think, where that points strongly is to some passages in 2 Corinthians that we love just dearly.
Yes, yeah. So what we find here is the context of 2 Corinthians. Paul, he doesn't go into it in depth, but it's obvious that there's a lot of, to use Evagrius' words, he's experiencing a lot of deprivation.
Right.
There's some frustration in the sense that he wants to join in the Corinthians. He has that church to reunite with them. He's unable to do that. There's a point earlier on in this letter where he says, he doesn't explain how, but he basically they thought that they were going to die. Like they got to the point of such suffering and affliction that they
He and his partners on the missionary journey.
Thought that their life was going to be over. And there's also a sense of this ongoing turbulation in relationship to the church and what the churches are suffering, because he says that his heart is he feels the compassion, the pain that the churches themselves are being afflicted with as well. That's the context of this. There is lots of frustration. There is lots of pain that Paul is going through.
Yes.
And rather than reading it against the story of, well, things should be here. This is my Paul's. This is my ambition. This is my desire that the church would prosper, etc. That our ministry would prosper, etc. And I'm frustrated, and because that is not happening, what we're going to find is an entirely different posture of way of perceiving his own experience. And the experience of the Corinthians.
Yeah, so let's just be clear. Like Paul, the great missionary, is experiencing great trouble in his work as a missionary.
And might even say there's probably a lot of failure.
A lot of failure. We just talk about his great successes, but he's probably experiencing a lot of failure. And what he's going to point to is something that is way more important and way more central to his life than quote unquote success or failure, even in Christian work.
Yes.
So do we want to just...
let's dive into it.
Let's stop for 1 second.
Go ahead.
So if he were a person just formed in our culture, like the only avenue for him to explain that would be one of two things, right? Or three things. One, it's his fault.
Yeah,
it's his fault. And then he would be like the many people like I counsel who come in and they just feel like so inadequate. Because, boy, I'm supposed to, there's this project of who I am, and if I just did it right, it would be great. Well, he's running into walls, so it's his fault. Or somebody has done this to me because I'm supposed to have this.
I'm a failure, or I'm the victim.
I'm the victim. Yeah. Or maybe God just doesn't follow through on his promises. It does seem to be the three options that people are taking in our world today. But he goes elsewhere. So where do we want to start here in 2 Corinthians?
I think it makes sense to start off in verse 7, right? Because he's sort of...
Chapter 4, verse 7?
Chapter 4, verse 7. This is 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah. Please, go ahead.
All right. So, I'm going to read 7 through 12.
Okay, sounds good.
He says, but we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you.
Thank you. I would say, if you were to look in the New Testament for the one place that sums up what life in this world before the resurrection of the dead looks like, what is it? What is human life? How do you characterize it? This is the passage in the New Testament I would go to. This is what it is and can be in this world. This is, if you want to know what Paul thinks human life is like in this world, this and maybe one other passage in Romans is where I would go. And let's start in verse 7 here, just to make sure we're clear. It says, we have this treasure in clay jars. Let's identify the treasure in the jars. Now the treasure is Christ himself.
Christ in the depths of the heart.
In the depths of the heart. Christ as that great shining glory of God, that in the Old Testament there are visions, and even the angels have to cover their eyes because it's so glorious.
Yes.
That treasure in clay jars. And we, of course, are those clay jars because we're made from the dirt of the earth. So
Yes.
that's this remarkable beginning, just seeming contrast, but really they go together, right?
Yeah.
We are these frail, fragile things, but we carry within us,
And humble things, really.
Yeah.
Clay jars, it is a humble thing. Yeah.
very humble, right? But we carry. There could be no greater treasure,
Yes.
right? There's no greater achievement or treasure in the world than Christ himself.
Yes.
And we are carrying that. And then he goes into this, what we might call a litany of difficult things. And there's a rhythm about it where he says we are, We are afflicted on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, and so on. And so there he is. He's naming these things he's going through. At one point, they thought they were going to die. A lot of people aren't listening to him. Some of the people he brought to Christ are following heretics and walking away from Christ. And he's got this rhythm. He says it's this, but not that. But we're afflicted, but we're not destroyed. We're crushed, but not despairing. But the interesting thing is what he does with that in the very next passage. Because what he's going to do, he's not going to understand those things as his failure. He's not going to understand those things as people taking something from him. He's not going to understand this as God not following through his promises. He's actually going to understand those things in terms of what he said in verse 7 about the glory of God,
Yes.
the great treasure, Jesus, in this clay jar, when he says this really, to me, just shocking passage in 10 and 11, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus might also be made visible in our bodies. You want me to read the next verse, or you want to comment on that?
Your comment.
I'll read the next verse as well, because he's continuing this thought. He says, for while we live, and literally in the Greek, it's like we the living, while we are living, we are always being given over to death. And most translations say for Jesus' sake, but this was originally written in Greek, and the most literal is this, right? For the living are always being handed over to death through Jesus, so that the life of Jesus might also be made visible in their mortal flesh. To me, those two verses about caring about the dying and the rising of Jesus, always being handed over to death through Christ, so that his life might be made manifest in him. He is still talking about those very practical, concrete frustrations in his missionary journeys. And he's not understanding them in terms of the project that is Paul or the great project God has him. He understands it in terms of Christ in him.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess I'd say a few things about it. The first thing is it's interesting. I think what we tend to do is we tend to rush to whatever those things that are going on in our life, the external things, like my job's not going well, my marriage is not going well, my kids aren't living up to my hopes for them, and we fixate on those things. And he doesn't actually talk that much about what's actually happening around him. What he's saying is there's this experience that I'm going through. And this experience is one of suffering, of affliction, of loss. We are perplexed, we despair, right? And he says, and this is to me what's profound, is he's saying all of that is the death of Jesus in me. And
none of that is separated from this idea of being a clay jar caring about the treasure. Because in fact, the treasure is itself something of a rhythm of dying and rising, right?
Right. So there's a sense that everything that he goes through, we are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. All of those sufferings are ways in which Jesus is manifesting his life to him. And that's very profound, and it's very challenging.
Yes.
Because, if I'm going to, use reference of having gone through, I use the example of having gone through a divorce, right? Immediately we're tempted to look at what did I do wrong or what happened to me.
Yes.
I'm either the victim or I am the one who is the cause and the failure here. And Paul is saying whatever that affliction is, it is in some sense a way of encountering Jesus, not in like this wonderful lovey-dovey way. I mean, this is the death and the dying of Jesus.
Carrying about in our bodies the dying of Jesus.
Yes. So there's a sense in which I'm the real purpose of my life, the real treasure of my life is Jesus Christ. And this experience that I'm undergoing is an experience which in what Paul is trying to use his own life as an example, that this experience turns me towards that treasure in this affliction, in this suffering. And it's a kind of, the way that happens is that I die. That those things, I guess this is the point, those things will be taken from me, and that is necessary for me to meet Christ. It sounds weird, but I mean, you've said this before, and it's so very true. Even if I never let's say, had a divorce or went through that kind of suffering, my marriage will still be taken from me.
Yes.
It will still be, and everything that I am, everything that I have, everything that is of value, every treasure that I have will be taken from me.
Right.
And that's necessary for me to meet Christ and become Christ. Because what I mean by become Christ is become filled with his Spirit, because that's the life of Christ, is self-emptying. It reminds me again of when Father Silvio said, we either take up our cross or we drag it.
Yeah, the Greek is literally pick it up.
Either pick it up or drag it.
It's not whether you have one or don't. It's
Right.
whether you pick it up or you drag it and it pulls you back.
And if we pick it up, that means we are actively participating in this this thing that Paul says is a treasure, which is it's mind-blowing because there's affliction involved in it. But there's a sense in which we're actively participating in the life of Christ. Or I can become, through my loss, through my affliction, through my suffering, I can become resentful and bitter, right? Because I should have those things.
And I mean, to be fair to people who are suffering this, you can't just decide to turn that off.
Right.
That is, we are deeply socialized into a way of life that inflames all those things Evagrius says will make us sad.
Yes.
All those goods and pleasures, that identity or so forth, that you don't actually have. They're just ideas.
Right.
In terms of ambition.
Yes.
And just inflames those. And then because it simply can't happen. When those things don't come, we're just crushed and despairing.
So I mean, I think what Paul is saying here is so fascinating, like so powerful and important. The obstacle to my joy is my own self, my own life, my own expectations, my own ambitions. That is the thing that is keeping me from Christ. And so there's a real sense in which the real journey of life, if we're going to talk about the project of life, if we have a project, Paul would say it's to die.
Yeah.
It's to die so that Christ's life will be manifest, so Christ's glory will be manifest in me.
Yeah, there's that connection. Right? We carry about in the body the dying of Jesus so that the living of Jesus might be manifest in our flesh. And why do we need to die? Why do we need to empty ourselves of ourselves to have Christ's life in us? Well, Christ is absolute selflessness. The joy he does have to give us, and it is joy, the peace he does have to give to us, and it is peace, is one that cannot be separated from his own selfless character. And so we can suffer these things we go through as failures on our part or something someone has done to us, or it can be taken up almost, so to speak, actively as saying, here is where I'm being schooled. Here is where I'm taking up my cross and I am dying so that the selfless life of Christ comes in me.
Yes.
And that life does bring peace and joy and so forth, sometimes even in the midst of this just massive mourning that this world brings upon us. I remember a number of years ago, I'd been through some stuff myself. I had this strong sense of who I was as a Christian man and someone training to be a theologian, and I went through a series of things that just, it made me not able to make sense of the story I told about myself.
Right.
I experienced a series of things as failures, as people doing things to me. And because I lost a number of things that even if they hadn't happened that way, as you said, I would eventually have lost them anyway. And then I remember excuse me, I didn't know how to tell the story of myself anymore. My life story made no sense, my story in Christ. Ironically, right? I didn't know how to tell my story of my life in Christ because of hardships.
Right. Yeah.
But I found this job and I was able to, kind of get things ready. And I was out to eat with a cousin of mine, Dr. David Smith, who was here a few weeks ago. And he and I were eating, and I had this new job, and things were getting kind of steady after just all this upheaval for a few years. And this one of the bosses where I work had too much to drink and came over and said, and this drunken thing, "Oh, we're going to lay off 500 people. See you, man," and walked away. And I just turned and I looked at my cousin and I said, adult life is just moving from one traumatic event to another. And I experienced that. I said it as a joke, but it was this idea of loss. But what I didn't yet see, and the sort of losing of my own story, losing of any sense of the ability to tell my story, is there were all these things there that was going to allow Ethan and my expectations and my desires and my ambitions that were doing nothing but setting me up for failure and misery. I was actually being given the gift of the dying of Christ so that those things, I would be emptied of those things. Exactly. So the life of Jesus could actually enter me more fully, that selfless life of Christ.
So I'm gonna get a little preachy here and say, I think our culture, this idea of building ourselves into this successful life, creating projects of our own lives, it's become kind of to the point it's like pathological, I remember when I was a kid, you could go out and play baseball and have the experience of having fun on the street playing baseball. And now we have to turn all of that into select sports because all of our children are going to become professional athletes, right?
Or at least get scholarships.
Right. And even now you've got, in junior high, my kids, it's already sort of like you need to be setting your children up for their career and their life ahead. There's a sense everything from earlier and earlier and earlier, our children are being understood, their own lives are being understood as projects of self-making. And we as parents are promoting that and pushing that. And to the point of, I can't imagine what the level of depression across our culture is going to be when all of our children realize they will not end up or have not end up being what all their parents and their teachers said they ought to become.
And that the only story they have to tell themselves is I'm a failure.
That's
I
right.
didn't do that.
And me as a parent, I guess this is my point. Me as a parent, what is my desire for my child? Is my desire for my child for them to have their life fulfilled and their peace in Jesus Christ, and learn how to do that. Learn how to become full in Him, to find peace in Him. And, every specific homework act that they do, you want them, encourage them to do well and to work hard in that. But it's not to achieve this artificial ideal out there. It's just to be able to practice the virtues of what it means to be a full human being, and in this moment, right? And my point is we do not teach our children that. We teach them this other thing. We set them up for depression. We set them up for failure, and we've done this to ourselves. And what Paul is saying here, I think, which is so very, very important, is that for me to attain happiness and joy right now, I have to learn to embrace my own dying. There's the ascetical part of my life where I basically learn to let go, and to let go of the most important things are those ambitions, those imaginations, that box I'm trying to fulfill. The only thing that matters for my life is when I meet Christ face to face, who will I be?
Yes.
Because everything else will honestly is passing.
It is passing.
It's all passing. It's all going to go. The only thing is, who is that person going to be when I'm stripped of every title, of every profession, of every occupation, of everything that I own, and I am face to face, and Christ says, this is who you are. That's what we call judgment, or judgment day. It's the truth of myself before Christ. right? Who will I be? Like, that's what matters. And to enter into that, to learn that, is this process of embracing the dying of Jesus within me so his life can be revealed.
And let's be clear on a couple of different levels. That's a very hard thing. We need to be patient with ourselves in this, because even in his world, like you get deeper into 2 Corinthians, Paul starts talking about this, and he says he got to a point where he said, "This is too much, Jesus, just take it away." And, Christ says, "Hey, my grace is sufficient. My power is made perfect in weakness." But even Paul at times despaired of him being able to live into this vision. I would say also we need to be patient with ourselves, because we live in a world that just the opposite of this is so much. It's not just the way we raise our kids. It's everywhere. We're bombarded with messages constantly that you are a project. You need to be a good business person of the project that is yourself. Yes. And you just cultivate this. And that's just so far from this vision of life is constantly handing over the difficulties and joys, and all of these are an opportunity to be united in the Lord. So what we need more than anything is to be taught how to dislodge that picture of ourselves as a project, an entrepreneurial project, out of ourselves. And so look, we're going to go through life, and in an involuntary way, we're going to suffer many things. The way we change our relationship to those involuntary sufferings is, on some level, training, prayer, to practice dying in prayer, to go in prayer and say, "Father, if you take this from me, it's yours."
So our culture sets us up, and again, this is so pathological. It's so pervasive in our society. It sets us up to try to, we say, imagine a box and fit your life into that box. To die here is in our prayer, in our daily life, whatever that idea is, that box of what I say, I'm supposed to attain this, is I sacrifice it. I say, this is something I give over to you. It's to go back to a part that we missed earlier. So the reason we carry this treasure around in clay jars is so that it may be clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. It is not, my life is not something that I make. Christ, this box that I have of what I'm supposed to be successful in, of what I'm supposed to do, I'm giving that over to you. That because this power doesn't belong to me, so that I can take up that treasure which is within me. So, for example, specifically in my life, the idea of what it means for me to be the successful pastor or to have the successful growing church or whatever, that needs to die. That needs to die. Me as a father and my family is going to look this way, and they're all going to behave this way, and all my children are going to be happy and get good jobs. That needs to die. That's a box that needs to die, so that the life that Christ is giving to me and to them and to the church, all of these things, that can be made known.
And it needs to voluntarily die, right?
Yes.
Not just tell myself I'll be okay when God takes this from me.
No, give it up.
In prayer, we must seriously wrestle with and say, Lord, if you take this from me, take it, it's yours. And in a sense, practice loss.
Yes.
Practice loss as being joined to Christ in his dying, so that his living can come through.
Because that's, to be honest, that's where we find joy, right?
So because when those things come, then we're practiced at it.
Yes.
We have freely, voluntarily done this over and over again in prayer. We recognize that the life of Jesus comes through that. There really is not reward, but the full, like the two-sidedness of Christ's life come together, the dying and the rising. Yeah. They can't be pulled apart. So that when we do suffer these things in this world, we've already practiced. So the peace that can pervade mourning the loss of a loved one or a career or a relationship, that can be there when it's already been given over.
Yes.
And to go back to an image, we don't have a lot of time here. We go over again and again back to this idea of being a temple. And a temple is where prayer is done. And the structure of that temple is sacrifice and revelation. Sacrifice is made to God. God is revealed on his throne.
Yeah.
And sacrifice is death. It's dying to this world, and then the life of God is manifest. Yeah. So dying and rising is sacrifice and revelation. And this is what we have in this passage. We are being handed over to death through Jesus. Our lives are a constant sacrifice, and we're waiting on revelation.
That's right.
And so the life of prayer, of discipline, of training is a life of running that temple. Before this world absolutely demands that sacrifice, we freely offer it.
And yeah, when we say that learning to offer the specific thing, our own success as a human being, our own life project, our own success, to sacrifice that would be one of the greatest sacrifices that we could make in this society, and one of the most difficult.
It's very hard. We
One
need to
of
be
the most
very
difficult.
patient with ourselves in this process.
So it is but to embrace our own dying in that way, and when we understand when those things are taken from us, that because our life has to be a sacrifice, like we have to die. Those afflictions, those deprivations, as Evagrius calls it, those things that have been taken from us, we can learn to see those, even in the pain of it, as aids to the gift, which is the life of Christ. We can learn to see that. This is Christ's life given to me here.
I mean, imagine what it would be. Like, this world is going to be what it is. It's a world of great joys and great losses, and it's going to be that no matter what. But imagine if we become people who, through practice, through training, through asceticism and prayer, we become people who do not suffer its losses as destruction. How free would we be to embrace the joys? Right? If we were not always haunted, if we say, yeah, we're prepared for this, it's coming. And of course, that comes with a trust in that final sacrifice and revelation of Christ's life in us, in which we enter into the world beyond those troubles. Like that has to be forefront in our mind, right? That's true life.
Yes.
But again, how free would we be, given we are all going to walk down these difficult roads, if we prepare ourselves, we train ourselves in such a way that its losses are not, if we don't inflame the expectation that makes those losses just be destructions.
Yeah.
And then we can embrace that life that's offered to us in and through all of these things.
Yeah, and I would say that that's an invitation to joy. And what I mean by that is that when we sacrifice the expectations of we're making our life for ourselves, we do not expect these great things of ourselves. We've learned to let go of them. When they do come, they are real occasions for real joy, in the sense of I've received something. Not I've accomplished this, but this was a gift given to me.
Yes.
And we all know the difference and the experience that we have between, I'm setting up, let's say, a vacation. I can have a good time on a vacation, I plan it, I execute it, I have good experience. But it's so profoundly greater when something is suddenly given that I didn't expect. That sense of joy that overflows in me, precisely because I have died to any expectation of receiving. Then suddenly everything that is given as a gift.
Yes.
And that's that profound life of Jesus, the resurrected life of Jesus, that joy that is not available elsewhere. My point is this: asceticism is cultivating soil for joy.
Yes.
It's not merely like self-death. I'm beating myself up. It's not that. We are preparing our own heart to really receive things in joy that way.
Yes. The life of Jesus, the living of Jesus manifest in us. And let's be clear what we're not saying. This isn't something you can do on your own. You need others. You need sisters and brothers in the Lord, people you can rely on and trust. Sometimes we need help, whether that's help from a pastor or help from a counselor or a psychiatrist. We're not saying don't seek those things out. But what we are saying is beware of this poison that is leached deep into all of our hearts just in virtue of the context in which we live.
Yes.
Begin to struggle against it. The struggle is worthwhile. None of us are going to get this perfectly probably in this life, but it is worth this struggle so that we can taste Christ's dying and rising even as we walk through this difficult world.
Yes.
Yes.
That's really good stuff. I think we're gonna have to wrap things up this way. I just want to say this as we leave. Of course, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. But hey, peace of Christ, right? Peace of Christ be with you. That's what we're talking about right now. Is the very peace, the stillness, which is Jesus Christ, and that to manifest in us. So,
Amen.
amen.
See you next time.